Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Mismatched. So before we start today's episode, I wanted to preface what this conversation is going to be. So today we're talking about accountability and healing. We're talking about sexual assault, but not in graphic detail, in real ways that it changes people. Today is about talking about the aftermath. So if you're listening and you need to pause or step away, do what's right for you. But one of the hardest truths about this podcast that I've learned is that heartbreak and trauma not only live in our minds, but they live in our bodies. And when something violates that, for me, the question is not what happened, but what's next? How do you move forward? For many, what comes next is a justice system that asks you to relive the worst moment of your life, defend your own credibility, and surrender your voice to a process that feels cold, slow, and deeply disempowering. And for me, it's no surprise that that's why people don't come forward more in the first place. But what if the justice system didn't have to re-traumatize? What if accountability didn't mean sharing? My guest today is someone who asked those exact questions and chose a path with very few people know exists. Marlee Liss is an award-winning speaker, author, and somatic educator. In 2019, instead of going through a traditional criminal trial after being sexually assaulted, Marlee participated in a restorative justice process through the courts, one that centered her voice, her body, and her healing. Now, this conversation is about choice, agency, and about asking questions about what systems are meant to protect people. About why systems meant to protect people so often leave them feeling more broken. Marlee, I'm so happy to have you in here today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that was such a thoughtful intro as well.
Oh, thanks. Well, I know this is not easy, and I know you do this often. And people have seen you all over every sort of media outlet and in publications because your voice has been so impactful. But revisiting it every time, I guess I ask you is does it get easier?
It definitely gets easier. I think it's changed. I think when I first started sharing, it was I had to get it off my chest still. But that was kind of healing in a way too. When we go through something terrible and we can't stop telling our friends, our people we love, we can't have enough, brunches that are focused on that. So at first I was I need to get this out, but that was more vulnerable. And now I feel I'm in a place where I'm not really sharing it for me anywhere. I'm sharing it with listeners in mind, with the people who need to hear it in mind, with all the survivors who have reached out to me in mind. And that knowing that it's not just about me, it's so much bigger than myself. It makes it a lot easier.
For sure. And this is a number of years ago now too, right?
Yeah. It's been, since the assault, it's been 10 years.
10 years.
Which is wild. It feels kind of like a full circle moment.
It is full circle because you are releasing a memoir.
Yeah.
And you just said that, off the record here,
yeah.
We were talking earlier and you were saying how you just submitted your last draft.
Yeah.
Which is
I
huge.
submitted it yesterday. And it was the best feeling. It was cute. I was at my mom's place and I hit send on it and she just started bawling. She's I'm so proud of you.
For sure. Well, especially because you said that you rewrote it 3 times.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work and a lot of time, I can imagine.
Yeah, but I'm so happy that I did because when I look back at draft 1 and 2, I'm oh, sweetie.
Time and reflection helps for sure.
Yeah.
And perspective.
Yeah.
But huge congratulations. That's an amazing feeling. What was that process like writing it? Also, because you speak about it, but then there's another thing to write about it and go through all of that.
Well, writing's always been a really big healing tool for me. Growing up, it was dance. I grew up in the dance mom's life, competitive.
What studio did you go to? If I can ask.
Gosh, I've never said this on a podcast.
Oh, there's always a first.
No, I love it. I went to TNT Dance Works.
Okay.
Then it turned into Dance Surge, and then I went to Elite Dance Works.
Oh,
and anyone in the dance world knows that's serious.
So I went to Vlad's. So we used to compete against Elite all the time.
That's wild.
But I'm older than you.
We have to exchange
yeah, for sure.
Because one of my first teachers went to Vlad's.
Oh, no
and
way.
I feel like you probably are the same age.
I for sure feel like I know who you're talking about. That's so funny. Small world.
Oh
so
my
I
gosh,
get it.
I love that. Okay, so, but that was always my outlet and my processing tool. And then after trauma, I lost it. Like I could no longer dance because I was just too disconnected and like mad at my body. Like I was still struggling with self-blame and things like that. So I couldn't dance, and I found myself reaching for the pen. And it was like, this is the tool I need to get destructive thoughts out of my head and onto paper. So like truly days after trauma, not with the goal of writing a book, but I just started writing and writing. Like I would wake up in the middle of the night and like start writing. And I really think that is one of the things that like helped me survive. And I kept writing. I do like, you know, artist way, like morning pages. I do journaling every morning. And so writing this book has been, I've actually loved it. And I was kind of waiting for the moment where I'd be like, sick of this process.
Yeah.
But it didn't come. Like I really loved it and just got to kind of be like crafty and creative about taking these really terrible things and turning them into like metaphors and words and like poetic references and whatever that I'm actually really proud of.
I can't wait to read it. That's
Thank
like
you.
so, I'm sure it's going to be beautiful.
Thank
like, you know, and again, like sharing your story in that way requires a lot of strength that I think, you know, it's led you to this point. Like the last 10 years have like led you to this point of being able to say the things that you want to say poetically and metaphorically. So yeah, I'm very excited for you.
Thank you.
So my first question is like, what is restorative justice? Because to be honest, I didn't know what it was until I heard your story and your explanation of what it was. So for people listening or watching, what is it?
And I hear that all the time, which is big fuel for why I haven't shut up about it, is because almost every time I share, someone says, or a lot of people say, I didn't know this existed. That was true for me as well. Like I did not know what restorative justice was, which is why I ended up going through the court process for like 3 years before fighting for restorative justice. And really what it is, it's kind of like an umbrella term. So it can take a lot of different shapes. And what it really is that it prioritizes repair and healing over punishment. And it also is survivor-centered, which is the opposite of the courtroom. The courtroom, a lot of people don't realize that the victims are considered witnesses in a court process. We're considered a witness in a crime done to the crown. It's this very medieval thing where it's like the accused versus the crown, and the victim's just there as a witness to provide evidence. So it really decenters the person who was harmed and kind of turns us into someone that's just there to give evidence, help the crown, and leave. So it feels like you're being really like used and discarded in a way that really mimics the trauma a lot of us went through. Whereas the restorative approach is saying, no, you're the person who was harmed. We should be giving you our care and attention, and whatever you need in order to heal, that should be at the very center of this process. So for me, what that looked like was I wanted my assailant to go to therapy. So he did therapy for about 7 months. And then I wanted to meet in a restorative justice circle, which is where you actually get to sit down with the person if that's what you want. If that's not accessible or it sounds terrible to you, it can look other ways. But that is what I wanted. And basically you can like ask the questions you have. You can show up with all of your emotions. You don't need to censor yourself. You can voice the impact, and that person's focus is on actually taking accountability and taking actionable steps so that they don't do this again.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Because, okay, so if I can go back to the 3 years, let's go back.
Yeah.
To 3 years in court. Why did you decide to go to court? How did you, because so many people and people might, or survivors might be listening, not have courage to be able to do that. What was it for you?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I wouldn't even chalk it down to courage, because if I had known then what I know now, I wouldn't have reported.
Yeah.
I really reported from a place of ignorance in terms of like, you know, with love for my younger self. I did not know what I was getting myself into. And honestly, the only reason I reported is because I was going through the motions of what victims are told we're supposed to do. So for me, like, I was in this state of shock and crisis. I had just been assaulted by this man I didn't know for like 5 hours. And I ran out of that place just in a state of total shock and crisis. Like, I was not thinking
For sure.
at all. And I ended up Googling, what do you do after you're raped? And I was like, well, I can't think. So I'm just going to go through these steps.
Yeah.
And it said, you know, write down what happened, go to the hospital, do a rape kit. And I did all those steps, and it led to a sexual assault nurse saying, you have two choices now. You can either report to the police or you can just go home.
Wow.
And that binary is what I really want to challenge, because I think that nurse was so lovely. I really think she was just like didn't have the information.
Well, like you said, I think it's ignorance of people not knowing.
People don't know
what's available.
Exactly. But that's what most survivors are told, is report or do nothing. And we know 94% of people right now choose to do nothing.
94%.
Yeah.
I imagined it was high, but I didn't know it was that high.
Yeah, less than 6% of people report in Canada.
Because they don't want to go through.
There's a
all
lot
of
of reasons. It's like, yeah, we don't want to go through court. Maybe we're afraid of retaliation. We know, a lot of us know that like rates of acquittal, meaning they get off with no consequence or anything, are really, really, really high. That it's a super re-traumatizing process. A lot of people don't feel safe going to law enforcement for different reasons too. So like, there's so many different reasons. Also self-blame. People might be like, oh, well, you know, kind of these like victim blaming myths. They might say like, oh, I was really drunk, or I was wearing this. Like, am I going to end up being blamed? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So many people don't report. So for me, my only reason for reporting was I couldn't fathom doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what am I supposed to do? Go home and watch Netflix? Like,
Yeah.
I was so, you know, messed up. Like, I was really, really in this place where I didn't know what to do. And so I was like, I guess I'll report. And me making that choice at that moment, that really uninformed choice, technically meant that I had, quote, quote, consented to like a years long justice process that I was now considered a witness in, meaning that I lost a lot of rights to change my mind, to set boundaries throughout, because I now had to be a cooperative witness for the Crown.
That seems so backwards to me.
Yeah.
Like I can't understand that. I guess this is specific to Ontario.
No, it's like, it's pretty universal actually, because
Really?
this is the way the court system is set up. If you look at any court case, it's going to say, in Canada, the Crown versus the accused. In the States, the state versus the accused. And so always the victim, the person, they wouldn't even say victim, they say complainant, is considered a witness.
I just like, it just doesn't make sense to me at all.
It's so dehumanizing, because it's just like, I just can't, I can't, me neither. I can't fathom this idea of like, a dear friend I care about telling me they've been assaulted, and me instantly being like, you know, it doesn't matter how you feel or what you need. You need to do this no matter what is actually truly healing for you. Like, you need to do this for the Crown, for the state. Like, it's so backwards.
And that process, I imagine, was quite difficult.
Yeah.
Especially because you're young. Like,
yeah. Yeah. I was 21.
That's so young.
Yeah, I know I was like a little baby. And I was listening to your episode where you talk about the toxic relationship that you were in. And, well, one, I was really struck by just like your openness and just thinking about how many people were hearing that, being like, same.
Thanks.
Yeah, so thank you. And I was like, wow, this is such a mirror to what survivors go through in the criminal legal system. Because we're isolated, in that we're told, you can't talk to other witnesses because you could be corroborating on like making up a story. My roommate and best friend was a witness in the case. So we're not allowed to talk about the sexual assault I went through in my own home with my best friend. Like, it's very isolating. And then you've lost your right to boundaries. You don't have a right to set boundaries or say no. When I was subpoenaed for the preliminary trial, and that was after almost 2 years. So I reported 2 years go by where I'm completely in the dark.
Wow.
I have no idea what's going on.
And you're just supposed to like go on living, not knowing.
Yeah.
And with no answers.
Yeah. And they're like, we'll update you when we can. Like, that's not really priority for us. And you're like, okay. And so once I'm subpoenaed, then I find out, I'm just a witness. And that means I don't have a right to set boundaries on the stand. So
they can truly ask you anything and you have to answer.
Yeah, we don't have a right to consent and boundaries in a process where we're supposedly defending our right to consent and boundaries. Like, this is when I started to be like, I don't know if this is working for me. Like, because then I'm sitting on the stand for 4-ish hours while my assailant's, just there staring at the ground. I'm having my sexual history brought up. They brought this like past situationship I had as a witness to attest to my character, kind of as if like the fact that I'd consented to things in the past meant that, of course, I'd want it in every situation going forward.
Wow.
So abusive. And then they kept saying, well, because you didn't leave a voicemail, because I was trying to get a hold of my friend once I was alone with this guy, because I felt, and I called her and I called her and I called her and she wasn't answering. And the defense lawyer repeatedly, well, if you didn't want him to do that to you, you would have left a voicemail.
What?
Like, what? Yeah. It's as if like that was proof that I consented to everything he did to my body for hours. Like, what? So, there's just so much. People say like it's re-traumatizing. I actually urge people to own that like it is an abusive process. When we think about abusive relationships, it's mirroring that isolation, that control, that lack of boundaries, that powerlessness that we start to feel. And it's like it kind of forces you to keep going through the process and appeasing whatever the people in power say to keep yourself safe. Because if I didn't do that, I could end up being punished.
It's like sadly ironic, as you're saying, that the fact that you're trying to defend yourself and get justice for what happened, and yet you're not really given a voice to do that. Yeah. Which is so counter what the purpose of all of it is. Yeah. It's counter to justice in general, Yeah,
absolutely. And I really felt that like after that experience so the preliminary trial is a smaller trial where they see is there enough evidence to do the big criminal trial. So that's basically like where I got to in the system before I was like really losing faith in it. But the thing that people need to know is like nothing I'm saying is unique. Like I have connected with maybe tens of thousands is too much, but like I think tens of thousands of survivors, and the stories I hear are just awful. And like I even connected with the Crown who was assigned to my case, and she was in the room, and we've stayed connected, which we'll get to eventually. Okay. But not in a way that minimized what I went through, but she was like, compared to how like terrible and traumatic these trials can be, like I'd say yours was like the standard. So really? People are just really being dragged through these processes and gaslit because we keep being told, and this is something that I heard in your story too, we keep being told, this is for you. This is for your healing. I know it sucks right now, but I know better what you need. And all throughout, you're like, okay, like that. And that's why I kept going, because I was being gaslit. And then I started gaslighting myself in a way of like, okay, like this is really painful, but I should be grateful that my case is being taken this seriously. or, you know, like not everyone gets to have a trial. Like other survivors might want this. I should be appreciative. I'm being told this is like what a win will look like for victims. I should be like appreciative of that. So the gaslighting that happens is like real.
Yeah, well, and then it's also leaving like deeper wounds in you that on top of
Yeah.
the trauma that has existed, that happened, you know?
Yes, it does. And it's like, it's really, really complicated because after trauma, I was so far from okay. Like, I had to drop out of school. I was having panic attacks. If I tried to pretend I was fine, my whole body would break out in hives. I was
Really?
like losing my hair at one point. I like wanted to take my life at one point. Like, it was such a painful time. And then I start doing this therapy, I start doing this healing. And as I'm doing that, I'm constantly hearing like a big part of your healing is like listening to your gut, voicing your boundaries, saying no and leaving when you feel uncomfortable, like knowing you have a right to consent. And so I'm trying to do all that healing work as I'm going through a system that says, actually, you don't have that right. And that's what's best for you. And so it's really confusing, and it not only makes our healing hard, but it actually becomes like a huge obstacle to it.
For sure. So, how did you learn about restorative justice then?
In a way that was way too complicated, that again, like the reason I don't shut up about this is because I don't want people to have to do what I did, which was like, so I did that preliminary trial. After that, I said, I just need to focus on my healing and survival again. So I just put the justice system on the back burner, like didn't think about it as much as I could. Another year went by. So now it's been 3 years. And then I get subpoenaed for the criminal trial. And my very first thought was like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, I don't want to go through all this again.
Yeah, I don't want to go through all this again. It's not helping, you know, to say the least. But I felt really like devastated about that idea too, that it would lead to nothing. And I called an advocate and said, you know, I think I might have to just walk away from this. And I kept like crying and crying and crying. And then I had a friend who said to me, you know, like, it's clear court was like not helping, but this also seems to really suck for you. You know, like if anything was possible, what would justice look like to you?
Yeah.
And that was like, honestly, the question that has completely changed my life. And it's something I hope we can all ask ourselves and survivors, because we're just not asked that. And our culture basically hands us a version of how justice should look. And it's like, you know, it should look like courtrooms and prisons and gavels and whatever. And often we don't question it. We're just like, okay, that's what all the movies show. Like, I guess that's what justice is. But when she asked me that question, it allowed me to be like, let me put that vision someone else made to the side and actually turn toward myself and ask that question. And when I did that, it was very clear. It was like, I want him to take accountability. I want to voice the impact without having to censor myself, because court says you need to show up. They told me to show up gray turtleneck, minimal makeup, not too emotional, not too stoic. Like, you have to fit this very curated vision of a quote, quote, credible victim. So I was like, I'd want to show up authentic with all of my feelings. I'd want to voice the impact. I'd want to ask the questions I have. And I'd want him to do deep work so that he doesn't do this again. And my friend is like this fiery lady, and she was like, so make it happen.
Oh, bless your friend.
Yeah, no, truly, right? Because like someone else could have been like, I wish that could be a thing, but it's not.
Which most people probably would.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So that just became a spark for me, where I started doing my own research. And I'm very adamant, survivors should not have to do their own research when we're in crisis. We should be given this information. But eventually I saw restorative justice, and I read about it. I saw it's not new. It's been done for a long time. Like, you know, prior to colonization, like every community had their own way of dealing with harm in the community. And so restorative justice was like the norm in so many cultures, from
That's so interesting.
from like indigenous communities across Turtle Island to like Maori communities in New Zealand and Africa. There's like a rich history of circles and peace building. Like every single culture, if you go far back enough, like Mennonites as well, like rabbis. There was a rabbi named Maimonides who did these. Like every culture had their own version of restorative justice before, really it was with the British North America Act less than 200 years ago that we were like, the courtroom is the only valid way to do justice. Like that's pretty recent. So anyways, that was a tangent, but it made me be like, oh, this is not new. This is a path that's already been paved. Clearly, I'm not the only person in the world who has these wants, because I was like, is something wrong with me for wanting to do this process? And so I felt really grateful for that. And then I also felt very frustrated that at that point, I was now 24. I had been studying social work. I'd been going through the criminal legal system for 3 years. I had no lawyer, no Crown attorney, no rape crisis center, no nurse, no prosecutor, no educator. No one had ever said, you have other options.
Why do you think that is? Do you honestly think it's just because it's not taught, it's not talked about?
Sort of. I think it's two things. I think it is, one, a lot of people don't know about it, but I really think the biggest reason is misperceptions. And research has even shown that it is that it's like, it's not funding, it's not legislation, it's misperceptions. And it's because this conversation opens a big rabbit hole for us, because we're really, really taught that justice equals punishment. And we're taught that care looks like our friends saying, I was assaulted, and we respond with, where is he? I'm going to kill the guy.
Right.
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 And so it's a really big like paradigm shift to be like, what if we prioritize healing over punishment? And it opens up a lot of beliefs for people. Like people will be like, but we need to keep each other safe. But then we actually get into the education and statistics, and we see that healing keeps people more safe and resources. I don't just mean healing like a mindfulness practice. I mean like deep work, therapeutic intervention. Like, the biggest drivers of violence are shown to be isolation, shame, exposure to violence, and unmet economic needs. So like addressing each of those things to make sure the person is less likely to do this again. So like that's what I mean by healing. But we're really taught that punishment is what keeps people safe. We see it in cancel culture. We see it in detention, suspension. So it's a rabbit hole of a conversation. So I think those misperceptions are what made that the reality.
I can't even imagine, honestly. Well, I know there's phases of grief and healing that people go through to come to, feeling justice, But like I just commend you so much for looking to that, because like I'm gonna say, like, I don't know if I would be able to have that mindset of healing somebody who did something horrible to me. Like that's something that I would really struggle with. And you being also very young, I think it's like, it's very impressive, and I commend you for challenging the system and approaching it in a way that is not the norm.
Well, thank you. But I also want to like de-unicorn myself because
no, you're still a unicorn.
I think it's actually a lot more common than people think, because at the time I wasn't like, I want to take a wand and heal my rapist. Like that wasn't really the vibe. It was more like I thought about what I needed for myself in order to heal. And it was accountability. It was being able to ask him the questions I have and get some answers. It was feeling some kind of reassurance he won't do this again. And none of those are uncommon. Those are really common needs that survivors have. And anyone had, like in conflict even, we have those needs often. Yeah. And then it was an honest thing of like, which approach is most compatible with those needs? And it was clear, the criminal legal approach wasn't compatible with those needs, but also doing nothing at all wasn't compatible with them. This was the approach that was the most compatible with them. And so I was really focused on myself and my own healing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a process that doesn't strive for a win-lose as a best outcome. It's a process that says, what if everyone can walk away more healed and therefore a safer member of society? So for me, it was more about like, I want him to be a safe person. He lived in the same building as two of my closest friends.
Really?
Right? Like I was like, I want them to be safe. And so I think it's less like saintly than people might think. It's more about like, what do I need and what's going to help me access that?
But even confronting that, like that does require like unicorn saintly mindset, honestly, because it's hard to hear those things. Also, as much as you want to hear those things because you know it would be healing, it's also really hard to hear those things said by the person that hurt you.
Right. Well, a huge part of it. So like a lot of people think too that restorative justice is like, we're going to throw them in a room and hope for the best. It's not that. There is so much preparation that leads up to it. My assailant ended up doing 7 months of extensive therapy, not just like one a month, whatever. He was doing that really deep work so that before we even, set a date for this circle, we already knew he's taking accountability. He's reflected on power dynamics. He's thinking differently about consent and how he treats women in the world. He's changed the media he consumes. He's now disrupting, because he was an athlete as well. He's now disrupting locker room talk. He's taking steps like that, right? So there was a lot that I knew before we even got to the circle.
Got it.
So, and it's like a very held and structured process. Like there's facilitators in the room who are trained to intervene or like de-escalate if it starts to be more harmful than helpful. So there's a lot in there that makes it more like safe and just makes sure that it's actually more healing than it is harmful.
Yeah. So what was it like for you going through that and being able to get answers to probably many questions that you had?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say that because of the way some policies in Ontario are set up right now, it was not like an easy thing to access it. And that's something that I'm really fighting to change alongside many survivors. And so I ended up, asking for this outcome and being met with all kinds of like, just projections of like, wow, is she dumb? Like, does she not understand that this was bad? And like, I had to work pretty hard to be like, no, it is because the system is failing me and so many survivors, and because rates of sexual assault have not declined in over 20 years, that I think we need
something
to do
needs to change
differently.
Yeah, for sure.
So luckily there was one Crown attorney in the room when I asked for this that really got it. Like she said, yeah, I've been a Crown attorney almost 20 years and I constantly see victims re-traumatize, rapists acquitted almost always. And in the rare case they're incarcerated, it's like a couple of years and then they end up reoffending.
Yeah.
So she said, I agree. Like we need to do something different. And she really fought for my case to end with restorative justice. And so when I got the call that we were doing this, that moment in and of itself was probably the biggest part of my healing, because it was the first time dating back to before the assault that it's like breaking a cycle, right? Because during the assault, I would say no. And I'd realize my voice has no power. Like it's not doing anything to stop this guy from doing this. And for years, I like felt like I was like, what's the point of even having a voice then? And as I was going through the system, it was the same thing. I'm not allowed to, speak my mind. I'm not allowed to voice the impact or say no and be respected. And so that moment of someone finally saying, I heard you, I heard your boundaries. I heard what you need. Let's do that. I was like,
That's huge.
It was huge. And it's so bare minimum, guys.
I know. That's the sad thing. That's the sad thing.
Yeah, it's so bare minimum. Like, think about when your friend
Yeah.
is hurt and if she says to you, all I really need right now is a hug. And imagine we're like, no, I think what you actually need, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, that option is really painful for me. We're like, well, I just know it. Like,
It'll be better for you.
it'll be better for you. Yeah, trust me, I know. Like, it's like, just give your friend the hug,
Yeah.
you know? So it's really bare minimum to be like, when survivors ask for something, we should listen. Or like when survivors set a boundary, we should respect it. Like, but anyways, because of the reality of the system and everything, that was really, really huge for me. And at that point, there was this beautiful like power flip, because we often talk about how victims are left with like our lives shattered and our assailant goes on as if nothing happened. And this was like sort of a flip where obviously I was still impacted, but that was the most like hopeful and like heard and empowered I'd felt in a long time because of this outcome. And so I was finally kind of like, I'm going to reclaim some things I love and like go back to spaces I once loved to dance in and like live my life again, while he was doing really deep, extensive therapy work. So that was like this very cool flip. And again, in that time, he was unpacking so many things, like also a huge theme around like redefining masculinity, because he was one of these, like, we often pretend as if all rapists are like psychopaths in a bush. We know the stat is like 1 in 4 women are assaulted. The stat is also that 1 in 16 men are abusers.
That's wild.
So these are our friends, are, you know, for some people, their sons or fathers or brothers. Like, you know, these aren't, you know, bad guys coming down from the sky out of nowhere. Like, our culture is really like shaping men to think this way. And so he was doing a lot of deep work around redefining masculinity and being like, oh, it's strong to cry. It's good to get help. If you've been through hard things, you should go to therapy, which is something I've heard you say too.
Yeah.
You know, and like women don't owe us their bodies, and being tough and dominant isn't always the best way to be, like things like this. So that was really meaningful for him to be doing that. And then finally they said, okay, like, he's done a lot of work. We feel like we're ready for the circle process. I'd done a lot of work already. I felt like I was ready. And they basically started taking steps to make it happen.
And so what does that process look like? You it's the 8, what is it? 8 hour or 8 step, is it?
Mine ended up being 8 hours.
Okay.
By no means is it like restorative justice is an 8-hour process. Okay. That's just what ours ended up being.
Okay.
So basically there's 2 facilitators. We found a nonprofit organization that does this, and that's usually how these processes happen. So like the survivor isn't paying or anything like that, which is correct to me. And so there was 2 facilitators assigned to it, and they put in about like 50 hours of prep work. Again, just like safety planning, like meeting with everyone who would be in the circle 1-to-1 to make sure people like knew what was going on, felt safe, like so trauma informed and caring. We decided, again, it's all survivor centered. So it's like they're turning towards me and being like, you know, how do you want the room to be while we do the circle? What would feel safe for you? Is there anything, we went to the room before, they said, is there anything you want to take out? Is there anything you want to bring in? What snacks do you want on the table? If you need to take breaks, you just let us know. Like opposite of court.
Yeah.
And how it should be. And then they also asked me, you know, restorative justice is community oriented. So it acknowledges that harm ripples. And so they're like, who else was impacted by this? And so I said, like, I want my mom and my sister in this circle, not just as people there to support me, but they had their own questions. They had their own feelings and like need for closure. So they were in the room. My assailant was in the room. His closest friend was in the room. that's something I asked for as well, because I didn't want him to walk away and pretend like nothing happened and try to forget about it. I wanted someone, a family member or friend, to be like, I heard everything and like witnessed it. And yeah, so we had this circle come together, and yeah, there was so much that went into it leading up. And by the time we got there, we knew that we did agreements and everything. It was still scary. Like, I think
Of
that,
course.
you know, in an ideal world, we're not like, what's the best way to deal with sexual violence? We're just like, we don't have it. So it was still scary, but we got there. They made the space feel like as safe as it could. And then they asked us one question, really, which was just, what brought you here today? And that's the question. We went around in a circle speaking to that for 8 hours.
Wow.
And they had said, you know, it takes as long as it takes, which it should. Because, like, think about any time you've had a hard, I know that's like minimizing it, but like a hard conversation with someone, you can't be like, we have 30 minutes. You're like, if we actually want to like get to a place where we've done some healing, like, we're having this conversation for as long as it takes. So that was meaningful to me. And the first time we went around, I was able to just finally like voice everything. And there's room, like, it's not this kumbaya, let's hold hands and sing it out process. There's actually room more than in court for me to like voice my anger, voice my rage, my grief, all the impacts in a real, authentic human way. And there's time for me to do that. I don't have to like have these concise, stoic sentences. And I could finally ask him the questions of like, why? Like, what led you to justify this? You know, and just like really get all of that out of my body. And by the time it got to him, it was still this scary thing of like, what's he gonna say? But he did talk about, well, before I jump to that, I'll say like, he did talk about what the criminal legal system was like for him and how it sort of discouraged him from taking accountability off the bat.
Interesting.
Like right as he was, you know, charged, and then he was, you know, you need to get a lawyer. The first thing the lawyer says, don't tell me what happened. From now on, like, this is the story. Don't say anything that might implicate you. So right away, he's discouraged from taking accountability. And for years, he's not allowed to like reflect on what he did, say it out loud, take ownership.
Well, that's why people keep doing it.
That's exactly. And it's like, meanwhile, survivors frequently, our biggest need is like, I just want the person to admit what they did.
Right.
But they're being discouraged from it. And then they're told like, if you do own up to this, you know, you can lose a lot. You can end up like not only incarcerated, but that means you have less access to like housing and employment for the rest of your life, and you'll be labeled bad forever. Like, it makes it very, and I'm not even talking from like a saintly place. I'm talking from like a logistic, pragmatic place of like, if we want them to take accountability, we're making it very hard for them to do so. So, you know, he talked about that, and then he talked about how he did over years from that start to like minimize it and twist the story a bit in his own head. And it wasn't until a close friend in his life, someone he said he like saw like a sister, she came forward and said that she had been assaulted. And she kept saying, I'm like, it was my fault, you know, I was blah, blah, blah. And he said to her, like, it doesn't sound like it was your fault. And he said the moment he like felt that empathy toward a survivor, it was like everything he did unlocked. And he was so overwhelmed with like what he had done and like disappointed with the person he'd become in the world. And he felt like really remorseful. And he was actually considering taking his life around the same time that I was also considering taking mine. And it was around that time that I came forward and said, I want to do restorative justice. And restorative justice is a consensual process, meaning like no one's being forced into it, because that's usually not going to go well. So
he has to be willing to do it as well.
But because of all that, he was in a place of like, I think I need this as well, or like I want to do this.
Yeah. It's also ironic that the two of you were going through very different emotions, but like needed the same sort of healing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There's a beautiful quote from, her name's Danielle Sarid. She's a founder of a restorative justice org. And she just says, like, as victims need healing, perpetrators need accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, this is such an extreme example, right? We're talking about sexual assault, one of the most like taboo and like intense and horrible experiences. But if we like, you know, reel it back a bit and think about a time we've like screwed our friend over, because all of us have like caused harm in one way or another. You know, we like posted something ignorant, or we like lied to a friend or something. We often have that want of like, I want to like make things right.
Mm-hmm.
I want to check in on them. I want to like tell them I'm sorry, right? So we often have that like normal instinct to do that. But when our culture jumps in and says, okay, but if you do that, here are the consequences, even with cancel culture,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you admit what you did, you're going to be canceled. You're going to be deplatformed. You might lose like your income and stuff.
Yeah.
It makes it really hard to do that.
It does. I have such a problem with that because I think it's worse than ever that people that is a thing. It's like, well, now it's also like a coined term that people throw around more often, so people know more about it. And I mean, I think in the last 5 years we've seen it play out quite horribly.
Yeah.
And I just always say, I'm like, give someone an opportunity to be better and say sorry. Like, what happened to that empathy in the world, and understanding that like people make mistakes and that's not how we make people better. Don't we need better people?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
It is the exact same conversation. And like, I'm so glad you're like, you know, thinking about that, because I think every single area of our lives right now mimics the court system. And by that, it's like, you know, we decenter the victim. Let's say an influencer says something harmful. The mob, the public, whatever, is so loud in that comment section. It's like, have we even checked in with the person who was harmed by that comment and seen like, what did they need? Are they okay?
Yeah. Which you hear more than ever. Influencers who say I've gone through something, have mental health issues, number one, or take their own lives, and the mental health gets the best of them because they don't get the opportunity to receive the support, and they're struggling alone. And it's like, I think it's just really overlooked and sad that that's what people are turning to. And people say, you know, but we have freedom of like, I have the freedom to say whatever I want to say and speak my mind and all of that. But at the same time, there's a responsibility that you have with your voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, and it's like somewhere along the line, we started thinking that accountability means punishing, throwing someone away.
Right.
And it's like, actually, accountability is about holding someone accountable to being the best version of themselves, to being the safest version of themselves. And it's just like such a twisted thing that we're like, it's about throwing them away. And it often just makes things more chaotic and violent.
Mm-hmm.
And so that being said, you know, he did then say, you know, he did take accountability for what he had done. Like, he did look me in the eyes and say, like, I'm sorry I sexually assaulted you.
Wow.
And there's nothing I can do to take it back. But I hope that, you know, being here today can like ease the burden of pain. And for some people, those might sound like just words. But if we're being survivor centered, we're like turning toward the person harmed. That was so huge for me. Like, I started bawling. Like, I felt like this like knot untied, and I started bawling these tears of relief. Like, it was like all the cultural gaslighting and self-blame and everything. Like, it was just the like bomb to that. Like, it was really powerful. And
you finally felt validated
exactly
in what you went through and how you felt about everything.
Yeah, and so many of us just want that.
Mm-hmm.
I know a survivor in the UK who ended up going through a court process for 5 years. And the whole time she said, I just want the truth to come out.
Yeah.
I just want the truth to come out. and he ended up getting off acquitted. And again, because he was in the system, his defense lawyer said, don't you ever admit that you did anything. And so she never even got what that little thing of like, I did do this. So many of us just want that validation and for that person to like ideally not do this again. And so knowing that he was taking accountability and that he had done and would continue to do really deep work to be a different man in the world, like that was so, so, so huge. And then you'd think they'd be like, okay, let's wrap it up. That was really powerful. But they didn't. They said, we've looked back, but what now and what going forward? And this is where it was really about him sharing about like what kind of guy he wants to be going forward, how he wants to treat women. And he talked about, all those things I said earlier of like reflecting on masculinity, disrupting locker room talk, asking for help, not being afraid to be vulnerable and show emotions. Otherwise, that can erupt into something violent. Like there was so much reflection there, and it became really empowering and like forward focused and hopeful. And by the time we ended the process, I was completely mind blown. I was like, not just did I feel like I got a lot of closure, but I was like, I feel really proud of myself.
You should.
Yeah, like I feel really like empowered and like such a big, beautiful version of myself. Whereas court, I felt like a mouse with a hand over my throat. Like I felt so small. And this, I walked out and I was like, wow, this is possible. We can have a process where we all walk away more healed and more safe. Like that's an option. So that is what really made me be like, I'm going to be loud about this. I'm going to go to the media.
So in going to media and sharing this, has it shifted things in the justice system? Has it raised questions? Have you had these conversations with the powers that be, so to speak?
Yeah,
because you're not the only one, as you said.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, first I'll say that that's what I was really struck by, was that I wasn't the only one. I didn't realize the volume of survivors who are like longing for something other than the court system. I just didn't realize. Like, so when I went to the media, I was kind of nervous that survivors would be mad at me. Like they'd be like, shh, nobody wants that. And there are some, and I'm always of the mindset of like, I am not saying this is the correct way to do justice. What I'm saying is this is not a one size fits all. We need to be honest about how the court system is harming us. And we need many options when it comes to justice.
Yeah.
And survivors should get to choose. So
for sure.
That's what I'm saying. So I do, I get the trolls, I get whatever. But I started getting thousands and thousands of messages, and I still get them from survivors. And the thread through all of them was, I wish I knew about this. So many, like people who went through court, ended with acquittal, went through court, tore their family apart, never felt safe going to law enforcement, had their assailant incarcerated, live in a state of fear because he's coming out in 2 years. Like there's so many people saying, I wish I had known about this. And that's what made me sort of like, pivot and commit my life to saying, okay, I'm going to advocate for this as much as I can. And then that's also morphed into not only should people know about this, but they should have access to it if they want it.
Yeah.
And that started looking like, public education. Because of what I said about misperceptions, I'm really into survivor-led storytelling, which is, what we're doing right now, where we hear from survivors, we hear about the realities of the justice system and what we actually need and what's possible. And we start to sort of like shift our minds around what justice can look like. So that's really like my passion project, is like shifting hearts and minds. But then because of those, as I'm going through this, I'm seeing the barriers. The Crown attorney who helped make my case happen ended up being penalized because of the policies that exist. And so I've become very passionate as well about like addressing those policies. In the Canadian Victim Bill of Rights, for example, it says all survivors have a right to be informed of restorative justice upon request.
Wow.
And because of those 2 words,
they don't know.
Upon request.
That's wild.
And you have to specifically
How
say
can you write upon request if you don't know that that's an option?
It's exactly that. Like I'll give an analogy I use in my upcoming memoir.
Yes. Oh, yay. We get it. We get an exclusive
But I'm like,
insight.
Imagine you're a waiter at a restaurant and someone comes in and they say, hi, I have a peanut allergy. What do you have? And you're like, all we have today is like peanut chicken, whatever. And they're like, okay, but like I have an allergy, so the peanut chicken is going to be really terrible for me. Like, do you have anything else? And you just like don't say anything. And then you go to the kitchen and you're like, well, we do have like this nut-free pasta dish, but because they didn't specifically say,
I want a nut-free pasta.
The nut-free pasta dish, you didn't tell them about it. Is that ethical?
No, that's not okay.
So it's so ridiculous that like that exists. And it's like, if we just remove those 2 words, upon request, because again, like all of this conversation really is about consent. It's about survivors shouldn't keep having no one should keep having our boundaries violated when we say that we need something or that we're not comfortable doing something. That should be respected. Informed consent means like we're told about our options, like the nut-free pasta dish. Like, so it's really about just like listening, acting accordingly, caring about what people need.
How do we get rid of those 2 words?
So I really am of the mind that like storytelling is the thing that shifts policies as well. So I will say in 2024, I founded a coalition called Survivors for Justice Reform. And right now we're 800 survivors who are all working to make restorative justice more known and more accessible. So we have done a lot of like, organizing work to make change here. A documentary came out in December about my story, and it has a really clear call to change like the policy, the Crown policy that my Crown was penalized because of. It's Crown Policy D4. And it says that technically restorative justice should not be used for sexual assault ever. But again, the alternatives are a court process that fails 99% of the time or nothing. So I think you get why we would want to change that. So we're really working to challenge that Crown policy and the Canadian Victim Bill of Rights. And mostly right now we're doing that through awareness raising, asking for meetings with the Attorney General, because the Crown policy doesn't even require a whole fancy like pass a bill process. It's just a matter of this one dude, the Attorney General, going, okay, I see why this would be helpful, and signing off on it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's even more frustrating.
Yeah.
Of like, this could be such a simple fix and change so many people's lives.
It would, but I think that the conditioning around punishment equals justice or punishment equals safety, it's a myth. If we look at the stats, it's a myth.
That's a constitutional adjustment that people need to
It runs
figure
really
out.
deep. It makes people question, like all the people in the comment section for cancel culture then have to go, is this helping? Like it really makes people question their whole like value system and like, it's like, that's why I think stories are so powerful, to make someone actually feel it and get it and go like, oh, I see now that this isn't working. And then hopefully see why we need change.
Well, that's why prison reform has become such a topic of conversation as well. And I know like there are celebrity advocates, that are like supporting that and making that a priority because the justice system fails in that regard. And I appreciate you sharing your story, and I hope that this, helps in some small way, and that whether it's somebody else listening that has gone through something similar or somebody who has the power to like make a change, because this needs to change. This is enough. We can't move on as a society. And given the state of our world, I think it's pretty obvious people need to shift their mindset, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's actually a relief for people when they hear about this. It can be. Because I think a lot of people, not just survivors, but even people in the system, like I do talks and training now for like judges, military, prosecutors, students, nurses. And I always think of this one judge I spoke with who at first he was really skeptical. He was like, you want me to like do what? You want them to sit down together? Like, no, like court, prison, that's the only valid way. And by the end of me sharing my story, he was crying. And I was like, what's coming up for you? And he said, for the past 3 years, every time I leave this courtroom, no matter the outcome, I feel nauseous because it was so re-traumatizing, because it was so like horrible. And
well, just like imagine me. Like you feel like that.
Yeah,
like
exactly. But I think a lot of people feel that way where we're kind of like there's so much trauma and pain. What do we even do with all this? And we've kept trying the same. What's that quote? It's like the definition of insanity is like doing the same thing
over and over.
So it's like we keep doubling down on the same approach, and it keeps showing us that it leaves people more traumatized and less safe. And finally, it's like this conversation can bring that relief because it's like, what if there's another way? What if there is a path forward that actually can break cycles of violence and actually bring people healing?
I hope that this helps and that we can do that.
Yeah.
And sharing your memoir and your story is going to be, I think a loud movement of making an impact on all of this.
Yeah.
So.
And I will say too, like for anyone listening that is sort of like maybe you're a survivor or your loved one is a survivor and you're like, I think this could be really helpful. You still can access restorative justice in many different ways, just not directly through crowns at the moment, but like anyone can contact some of the amazing restorative justice organizations that do exist and get support. So I do have a resource guide. It's like if you go to my site, it's marleeliss.com/resource, and it has organizations, books, podcast documentaries for you to learn more about this. And also feel free to reach out because I hear from people all the time who are like I got a message like yesterday from someone being like, I feel like I've been waiting to learn about this approach since I was like 12.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, it's like we deserve to have this information. We deserve to know our options, even if it's not for us. We still deserve to know about all the menu options and then choose the one that actually works best for us.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask a question that I probably shouldn't ask, but I feel like I can.
Yeah.
And you can tell me like I'm not answering this. Has your assailant said anything to you in the last 10 years? Is he a changed man? Do you have any like line of sight of that?
Good question. So we did the circle in 2019.
Okay.
And there was a lot he said in the circle that I would say shows like I feel like the language of like is he a changed man is like so dramatic.
I know.
Right? But I'm like but I'm like I absolutely believe he is completely transformed by this process. Like he was like, and his friend as well, like sobbing in the process, being like, this is the most real thing I've ever been a part of. I've learned more through this than I have in my entire life. I'm treating women differently now. Now when we talked about this in the circle, he said, now when I am having sex, I am practicing consent. I am checking in about boundaries. I am stopping when they say stop. If they are free, like, if they are, not moving, I'll check in and say, are you okay? Like these things that are such tangible changes. Now, we haven't talked since the circle, but that was of my choosing because part of the circle process is deciding on like boundaries going forward. And I didn't know him before this. Like he wasn't someone in my life. And at that point, I had made almost 4 years of my 20s, like half of my 20s were solely focused on this rape and the healing and the justice and the aftermath. And so I was like, I am so happy to leave this room and like
close this chapter.
Yeah. So it was really by my choosing that we didn't. Now, if I could go back in time and change something, what I would have loved is if the facilitators checked in with him and then updated me, because something he said in the circle was, I want to play a role in stopping sexual violence. And that was really meaningful to hear, really meaningful. And I have no idea if that's resulted in anything, and how cool would it have been? And this is common in restorative approaches. If the facilitator said, we're so happy you said that, we're going to follow up with you next week, get you set up to volunteer at this organization, and then we're going to keep Marlee updated on that. So if I could change something, that's what it would be.
Yeah, that's like the aftermath of accountability of what that really looks like. But I also understand, the boundary, and also, believing in someone, taking someone's word. There's something to be said about that I know we don't often do, because there's a lot of doubt in people, but it clearly resonated with you, and that's like worth holding on to.
And releasing ourselves from the emotional labor of like, I'm gonna make sure you keep doing your work. It's like, I'm not your mother. Like,
for sure. One more time, where can people go when they want to contact you or look for resources and have this conversation?
So everything's just my name. My Instagram is Marlee Liss, MarleeLiss, and I do post about this stuff a lot, as well as like pop culture, violence prevention. So definitely connect there. And then my website's the same, marleeliss.com. Definitely get that resource guide if you want it. And then if you want to get involved with Survivors for Justice Reform, which is our coalition of survivors and allies advocating for this, there's some really beautiful like connection, community, skill shares, advocacy that's happening there. So our website is survivors for, like the number, justicereform.com. And hopefully my documentary will be on some kind of streamer soon.
That's what I was going to ask you, is where can people watch it?
Well, if you're listening to this and you work at Netflix or Crave.
There you go. There you go.
Let us know, because they're currently like the directors
looking for
shopping
a distributor.
it. To distributors. So like hopefully somewhere soon.
Fingers, toes, legs crossed.
It's called The Limits of Forgiveness. So who knows when you're listening to this? Maybe it's on something. So you can look it up. And then my memoir will be out in still a year. So, but.
So then you have to come back.
I would love.
And we can revisit things, and we can chat and catch up. And I so appreciate you sharing your story and being so vulnerable. And I admire your strength. In my eyes, you are a unicorn. And I really appreciate it, Marlee.
Thank you so much.